the air heavy with the smell of coal. It was late May 1962, and smoke already rose in thin white threads from cracks along the edge of the landfill. At first, no one thought much of it. Fires had started before and been put out, but this one burned deeper. Beneath the town, a maze of old mine tunnels stretched for miles. The fire found its way in. On a hot afternoon, the ground near the center of town began to tremble. A section of earth behind the gas station opened in a slow sinking collapse. The smell of burning coal poured upward, thick and choking. 2 workers ran to the edge. They could hear the roar beneath them like a furnace. The heat was intense, even standing back. Then came the sound, a low groan from beneath the earth. Not the crack of breaking rock, but something longer, deeper, almost like a voice. Before anyone could move, the ground split again. A sheet of flame burst upward from the crack, reaching higher than the gas station roof. The men staggered back, shielding their faces from the heat. The flame subsided, leaving a black smoking pit. The heat rising from it was enough to blur the air. People gathered along the street, staring in silence. The fire below continued to burn unseen, spreading slowly under their feet. By evening, smoke rose from a dozen places across town. The streets grew warm to the touch. The smell of sulfur thickened in the air. The ground trembled again. Far beneath the surface, something shifted in the tunnels. By early June, the fire beneath Centralia had spread far from the landfill. Smoke drifted through cracks in the streets. Yards began to steam in the early morning, as if the ground itself was breathing. At first, people tried to go on with their days. Children walked to school, past the curling smoke. The gas station stayed open, though the asphalt in front of it had begun to sag. Then the heat grew stronger. The air near the ground shimmered in the summer sun. Some said they heard sounds coming from beneath their basements. Not the shifting of coal or rock, but the faint echo of voices. The church at the center of town held a service. One Sunday, as the smell of sulfur drifted through the windows, the congregation prayed for safety. Outside, smoke rose steadily from the hillside. One afternoon, the fire reached an old shaft beneath the south end of town. A section of road opened without warning, swallowing part of the sidewalk. From the darkness below came a burst of hot air, carrying ash, and a low rumble that rattled windows nearby. People began to leave. Some stayed, insisting the fire would burn itself out. But the smoke kept rising. Late one night, a boy walking home heard something in the mist that had settled across the street. A shape moved slowly through it, pale and tall, just at the edge of the light. When the boy turned to look again, the street was empty. By the end of summer, the fire beneath Centralia showed no sign of slowing. The heat rose through the ground in waves. Patches of earth smoked day and night. Houses closest to the worst areas were abandoned first. Windows boarded, doors left open. Grass near the old streets turned yellow, then black. Those who stayed began to notice things that did not feel like smoke or heat. At night, shapes moved at the edges of the mist, curling through empty yards. Lights flickered in houses that no longer had power. The fire department stopped responding to calls about strange noises under basements. They told residents it was shifting rock. One evening, the old highway outside of town cracked open in a long, jagged line. Steam poured upward in thick gray waves. The smell of sulfur carried for miles. A small group of people gathered to watch the steam rise. In the drifting haze, some swore they saw shadows moving just beyond sight. Too tall, too thin. By winter, Centralia was half empty. Entire blocks were silent, except for the low hum of the fire deep below. At night, the town felt hollow. The sound of footsteps sometimes echoed from streets that should have been empty. By early spring, only a handful of houses in Centralia still had lights at night. The fire beneath the town had burned for nearly a year, and the smoke never stopped. The few who remained lived in a world half hidden by mist. The streets were cracked and warped. Yards had turned to patches of bare earth where nothing would grow. Mary Kessler lived in one of the last houses near the old highway. Each night she heard the low sound beneath her floor, like a distant engine. At first she told herself it was the fire, but the sound was uneven, as if it came from something alive. One evening she looked out her window and saw a shape in the street. The mist had gathered thick near the corner. In it, a tall figure stood still, its head slightly bowed. She turned away for just a moment. When she looked again, the street was empty. Down the road, the old church still stood, though services had long stopped. Some nights, a faint light glowed in the windows. No one admitted to going inside. One of the last families left town after their basement filled with smoke overnight. They said they heard voices coming through the floor, mixed with the crackle of fire. By summer, Mary Kessler's house was the only one left on her street. At night, she heard footsteps outside moving slowly past her door. The fire kept burning below. By late summer, the fire had eaten deeper into the tunnels. Below, the ground in places was hollow and soft. One Auguster was heavy, and the mist lay low over the old highway. A deep cracking sound rolled through the town like distant thunder. Near the edge of town, a section of road gave way. The asphalt sank slowly, then split wide. A pit opened where the ground had been whole just moments before. Steam poured from the gap in thick waves. The smell of burning coal and sulfur filled the air. The heat radiating from the hole was strong enough to warp the air above it. Mary Kessler stood at her porch, staring at the collapse. She could hear something beneath the roar of the fire. A low, echoing sound rising from the pit. The noise grew louder. A vibration ran through the ground under her feet. The fire company arrived, but kept their distance. The pit was too deep. The edges too unstable. By nightfall, the mist had thickened around the hole. The few remaining residents packed what they could. Most left before morning. Only a handful refused to go. They said they had lived with the fire this long. They would not leave now. Mary stayed. That night she woke to the sound of footsteps on the street. Outside her window, Mary Kessler's house was the only one on her street with light in the windows. Every other home sat dark and empty. The mist rolled freely through the gaps in broken fences and cracked sidewalks. The air smelled constantly of sulfur now. The sound beneath the floor never stopped. Sometimes it was the deep roar of the fire. Other times it was softer, like something shifting in the tunnels. One night Mary sat by the window watching the mist drift down the road. It was unusually thick. That evening, almost like a slow river moving between the houses. Through it, a figure appeared. At first, she thought it was just another trick of the smoke, but the figure grew clearer as it drew closer. Tall, too thin, its steps slow but deliberate. Mary stood frozen at the window. The figure stopped in the middle of the street. The head tilted slightly upward, as though it were looking directly at her window. The mist moved in waves around its legs. Mary turned away from the glass for just a moment to grab the lamp. When she looked back, the street was empty again. She sat, awake until dawn, listening to the low hum from beneath the floor, in the gray morning light. She noticed new cracks in the road outside her house. Steam drifted from them in thin streams curling toward her porch. The nights in Centralia had grown darker. Without streetlights, the only glow came from the dull orange haze that sometimes rose through the mist. Mary sat alone in her kitchen. The hum beneath her floor was steady tonight, low and deep, like the sound of a machine far away. Then it changed. It rose in pitch, slowly, until it became something closer to a voice. The sound moved in waves, as if there were words beneath it, though too faint to understand. Mary stood still, listening. She could feel the vibration through the floorboards. Then something shifted in the tunnel below, a heavy dragging sound that moved slowly from one end of the house to the other. Mary backed toward the hallway. The sound followed. The mist outside had thickened. It pushed against the windows in pale ribbons. From somewhere deep below came a sharp crack like rock breaking. The floor beneath her feet trembled. She grabbed her coat and stepped onto the porch. The street was empty. The mist curled around her ankles. Then from behind her house, she heard it again. That slow, dragging sound. Closer now. The dragging sound moved closer. Mary stepped back toward her front door, her eyes fixed on the side of the house. The mist shifted near the old cracks in the road. Steam pushed upward in slow bursts. The smell of sulfur was stronger than ever. Then the ground near her porch trembled. A thin fracture opened in the dirt, curling outward like a dark vein. Heat poured from it in steady waves. Mary stood frozen. The sound beneath the ground grew louder. Something was moving upward, through the tunnel below her house. The boards on her porch creaked, though no one stood on them. Then the floor of the porch bent slightly as if under weight. The sound of splintering wood filled the air. Mary stepped back inside the house, slamming the door. But the vibration in the floor only grew stronger. From the hallway, a shadow stretched across the wall. It did not match the shape of anything in the room. It moved slowly along the floor, toward her. Mary ran to the back of the house. The air was thick and hot. Outside the mist had gathered, so dense she could not see the end of her yard. Behind her, the sound of the dragging rose again. Mary stood in her back doorway, the heat pressing against her skin. The mist outside swirled as if stirred by something heavy moving through it. The dragging sound grew louder. It came from both beneath the floor and from the yard as if two paths were converging. Then the ground behind her house shifted. A section of earth near the old shed rose slowly, bulging upward. Cracks split across the surface, releasing bursts of steam. Mary's house, her eyes fixed on the shifting ground. With a deep crack, the earth split wide. A dark opening yawned where the soil had been solid. Moments before, from within came a wave of heat and the faint sound of breathing, slow, heavy. The mist thickened at the edge of the hole, curling upward like pale smoke. Shapes moved within it, pale and long-limbed, just at the edge of sight. Then something rose from the darkness. At first it looked like stone, slick and black from the heat. But it moved with a slow, deliberate motion. The air around it shimmered as if the fire itself clung to its surface. Mary backed away, but the figure continued to rise. Its head tilted slowly, as if it could hear her footsteps. The shadow on her wall stretched taller than the doorway. Mary stumbled back through her kitchen, the heat following her like a wave. The shadow on the wall stretched impossibly long, bending across the ceiling. Outside, the mist surged forward, filling her yard until it pressed against the windows. The sound of the dragging was louder now, as if the thing from the pit had crossed her porch. The floor trembled. Fine cracks split across the boards, releasing a thin curl of steam. Mary turned toward the front of the house, but the air there was no cooler. The mist was seeping under the door, curling across the floor in slow, pale ribbons. She could hear breathing now, not from outside but from the walls. The sound deepened. It was joined by a second slower rhythm, as if something larger exhaled beneath the ground. Then the floor near the hallway sagged. Boards cracked and splintered. From the gap rose the same slick black surface she had seen outside. The shadow in the room grew darker, taller. Mary's last candle went out. The house was swallowed in heat and darkness. Outside, the mist rolled down the street, covering the last lit house in Centralia. Epilogue extract from Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection Report, Centralia, Incident File 198108. Remaining occupant. Summary on August 14, 1981. Remaining resident, Mary Kessler. Reported missing from her property on South Street. No signs of forced entry. House interior shows significant heat damage to floorboards. Notes from inspection: multiple fissures around property, emitting steam and sulfurous gas. Temperature at surface measured at 150 degrees Fahrenheit. Sound recordings during inspection captured low-frequency vibrations beneath ground. Status: property condemned. No recovery of remains. Final entry: town officially declared uninhabitable. Remaining residents evacuated. Local forum POSTR, Paranormal Pennsylvania, posted by user Centralia Explorer, 22:5, June 12, 22:5. Title: visited Centralia this morning, heard a hum under my feet at the old Mary Kessler house. Body: I drove up to Centralia today, just as rumors said no one could stay there anymore. I parked near the safe zone boundary and walked slowly toward the abandoned houses on South Street. The mist lay heavy over everything. Even though it was midday, I could see steam rising from cracks in the asphalt near the old Mary Kessler property. The ground hissed softly under my steps. I stood at the porch of that house. It looked untouched except for scorch marks near the foundation. Yet I felt something pressing into my chest like air thick with heat. I had my recorder running. After 20 seconds I heard it. A low, distant hum coming from deep beneath the boards. So low it sounded more felt than heard. Then came another sound that froze me. A slow, dragging noise like something moving under the floor. It lasted 10 seconds then stopped. I jumped back and walked off, but I still felt it, tight in my chest. The same oppressive weight. I played the audio after I got home. The hum was there and clear beneath it, a faint whisper tone I could not understand. I have the recording, if anyone wants it. I also saw a shadow at the edge of the mist on the street. Tall, slender shape, standing still, just beyond the cracked asphalt. When I looked again, it was gone, so if you think Centralia is just a burnt-out coal town left behind, think again. Something remains beneath the smoke and heat,